What if I told you that right now, scientists are on the verge of bringing back a creature that's been extinct for over 4,000 years? Imagine the woolly mammoth, once thought lost to history, roaming the Earth again. It sounds like science fiction, right? Well, it's not. This is the Mammoth Project, and it could change everything we know about conservation, climate change, and the future of our planet. But with such a monumental idea comes big questions. How are they doing it? Why bring back a creature from the past? And what are the risks and rewards of playing God with nature? Welcome back to Myles Off, I'm Dave, and today we're diving into a project that's so ambitious, it sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie. So what exactly is the Mammoth Project? Well, it's one of the most exciting and ambitious scientific undertakings of our time. The Mammoth Project is led by a group of geneticists and researchers who are on a mission to bring back the woolly mammoth, a species that went extinct around 4,000 years ago. But we're not just talking about cloning a mammoth, the goal is much more complex. Using advanced genetic engineering techniques, scientists are working to create a hybrid animal by inserting woolly mammoth genes into the DNA of Asian elephants. Why Asian elephants? Well, they're the closest living relatives of woolly mammoths, sharing about 99% of their DNA. By editing their genes with CRISPR technology, scientists hope to create an elephant that has many of the mammoth's characteristics, like thick fur, and the ability to survive in freezing temperatures. This involves a process called gene splicing, where specific mammoth traits, like their distinctive hair, fat storage, and even their ability to tolerate cold, are being added to the elephant genome. If all goes according to plan, these modified embryos could eventually grow into what you might call a mammoth, an animal that looks and behaves a lot like the woolly mammoth. But the project isn't just about creating a cool new species. There's a much bigger picture here. Restoring a species that can play a vital role in our planet's ecosystems. Now that we know what the Mammoth Project is all about, let's get into the real question. How are they actually bringing back the mammoth? This isn't like Jurassic Park. There's no frozen mammoth DNA waiting to be cloned. The process is a lot more complex and honestly mind-blowing. The first step in this process involves identifying the genes that made a woolly mammoth, well, a mammoth. We're talking about traits like their thick fur, large size, and ability to survive in extremely cold environments. Scientists have managed to extract ancient DNA from well-preserved mammoth remains, found in permafrost. By comparing this DNA to that of Asian elephants, they've pinpointed the specific genes responsible for these unique mammoth characteristics. Next comes the magic of CRISPR technology. CRISPR is a gene editing tool that allows scientists to cut and paste DNA with incredible precision. Think of it like a biological find and replace function in a word processor, but for genes. Using CRISPR, they're able to insert those mammoth genes into the DNA of an Asian elephant, but here's where it gets really interesting. They're not just adding one or two genes, the goal is to create an entire set of traits that will make this new creature as close to a woolly mammoth as possible. And then the next step is to take these genetically modified cells and turn them into embryos. These embryos could then be implanted into a surrogate Asian elephant, which, if everything goes as planned, would give birth to a hybrid creature, which some are calling a mammoth. Now this is where the science gets even more futuristic. Researchers are also exploring the idea of using artificial wombs to bring these embryos to term, which could open up even more possibilities for de-extinction projects in the future. If successful, these mammoths would be released into specially designed habitats in the Arctic, where they could help restore grasslands and potentially slow the melting of permafrost. But that leads us to another big question. Why? Why go through all this effort to bring back the woolly mammoth? The answer actually has a lot to do with our planet's future. One of the main reasons scientists are pushing to revive the woolly mammoth is to combat climate change, particularly in the Arctic region. Here's the thing. The Arctic is warming up faster than any other place on Earth. As the permafrost, the layer of permanently frozen ground, it melts and it releases massive amounts of greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide and methane into the atmosphere. This accelerates global warming even more. But the woolly mammoth could help slow this process down. How? By transforming the landscapes. These animals were known as ecosystem engineers. They helped maintain the Arctic steppe, a grassland ecosystem that was dominant during the last ice age. Mammoths would knock down trees, and this allows grasslands to spread. And grasslands in turn reflect more sunlight than forests, keeping the ground cooler. Plus, by trampling down the snow, mammoths could help maintain the permafrost, preventing it from melting as quickly. Restoring this type of ecosystem could be crucial in the fight against climate change. Scientists believe that reintroducing mammoth-like creatures could help bring back these grasslands, which might stabilize the permafrost and reduce the release of greenhouse gases. But it's not just about climate change. There's also the idea of restoring lost biodiversity. The woolly mammoth was a keystone species in the ecosystem, meaning its presence had a huge impact on the environment and the other species living there. By bringing back the mammoth, or at least a close relative, scientists hope to restore some of that ecological balance that was lost when these creatures went extinct. This could benefit a wide range of species from plants to predators. And then there's the question of whether we owe it to the planet to bring back a species that went extinct largely because of human activity. Some argue that since humans played a role in the mammoth's extinction through overhunting and habitat destruction, we have a responsibility to try to undo that damage. Now, of course, this idea isn't without controversy. There are ethical questions about playing with nature, the potential risks of introducing a new species into modern ecosystems, and whether resources could be better spent protecting the species we still have. But whether you're for or against it, the Mammoth Project is about more than just resurrecting an ancient animal. It's about addressing some of the biggest environmental challenges we face today, and thinking creatively about how we can heal our planet. But as with any groundbreaking project, there are some serious challenges that scientists are facing along the way. Let's dive into what's standing in the way of the Mammoth Project. First up, the technical hurdles. Genetic engineering is still a relatively new field, and while CRISPR has made gene editing more precise than ever, it's still not perfect. One of the biggest challenges is figuring out how to edit the elephant's DNA in a way that will accurately replicate the woolly mammoth's traits without causing unintended consequences. For example, it's not just about giving an elephant thick fur. Scientists have to consider how these genes will interact with each other, how they'll affect the animal's overall health, and whether they'll create unexpected mutations. It's a delicate balancing act. Then there are the ethical challenges. The idea of de-extinction, bringing back species that have been extinct for thousands of years, it raises some big moral questions. Is it right to bring back a species just because we can? And what happens if these animals suffer, or if they disrupt existing ecosystems? Critics argue that instead of focusing on resurrecting extinct species, we should be putting more effort into conserving the species we still have. After all, there are countless animals on the brink of extinction right now that desperately need our help. Another major concern is animal welfare. For the Mammoth Project to succeed, researchers will need to use surrogate Asian elephants to carry the genetically modified embryos. But this raises questions about the health and well-being of these elephants. What if the embryos don't develop properly? Or if the birth process is just too risky? And what about the mammoths themselves? If they are born, how will they adapt to a world that's very different from the one their ancestors lived in? There's a real possibility that these animals could face challenges that we haven't even anticipated yet. And let's not forget the environmental challenges. Even if the Mammoth Project is successful, releasing these animals into the wild, it's a huge gamble. Scientists hope that they'll help restore the Arctic grasslands and slow down climate change, but there's no guarantee that things will go as planned. Reintroducing a species into an ecosystem is always risky. There's a chance that mammoths could end up disrupting the local environment, or even outcompeting other species that have adapted to the current conditions. And if things go wrong, it could be incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to undo the damage. And then there's also the question of funding. Projects like this require massive financial resources, and while the Mammoth Project has attracted some big-name investors, sustaining long-term funding, it's always a challenge. Research, development, and eventually conservation efforts will require continuous investment. So while the Mammoth Project is an exciting and potentially world-changing endeavour, it's also one that comes with a lot of challenges: technical, ethical, environmental, and financial. These obstacles are real, and they're why some people are still skeptical about whether we should even be attempting this. In the end, whether the Mammoth Project succeeds will depend on how well these challenges are addressed. It's not just about bringing back a cool animal from the past, it's about making sure we do it in a way that benefits the future of our planet, and all the species that call it home. And now you might be wondering, where exactly is this project today? How close are we to actually seeing a woolly mammoth or something like it walk the Earth again? As of now, the Mammoth Project is still in the experimental stage, but there's been some significant progress. The team, led by scientists at Colossal Biosciences and Harvard's George Church, has successfully identified and edited dozens of genes from the woolly mammoth into the DNA of the Asian elephant. These edits include the traits like fur growth, fat storage, and cold resistance, basically the features that make mammoths perfectly suited to the harsh conditions of the Ice Age. Right now, these edited cells are being carefully studied to make sure they function as expected. The next big step would be to create viable embryos using these cells, which could then be implanted into a surrogate elephant, or possibly even an artificial womb. But here's the thing, we're not there yet. Creating a living, breathing animal from these edited cells, it's a complex and time-consuming process. The researchers estimate that we could see the first mammoth calves within the next few years if all goes well, but there are still plenty of hurdles to overcome. In terms of funding and support, the project has garnered attention from big-name investors and conservation groups. This has helped accelerate progress. This financial backing is crucial for the next phases, which include not just the science, but also planning for the animal's potential reintroduction into the wild. But it's important to note that this isn't just about one lab or one group of scientists. The Mammoth Project is part of a larger field called De-Extinction, where researchers around the world are working on similar efforts for other species. So what happens here could pave the way for future projects aiming to revive other extinct animals. Another exciting development is the planning of potential habitats. There are already discussions about where these mammoths could live if they're successfully brought to life. The Pleistocene Park in Siberia is one such place. It's a reserve designed to recreate the Ice Age ecosystem that mammoths once roamed. So to sum it up, the Mammoth Project is moving forward, but we're still in the middle of a very long journey. The science is advancing, the funding is in place, and there is a real vision for what the future could look like, but it's going to take more time, more research, and likely a few more breakthroughs before we can truly say we brought the mammoth back. If, and more likely when, this happens, it could be one of the most incredible scientific achievements of our time, with far-reaching impacts on conservation and our understanding of life on Earth. Now, what could happen if this project succeeds? What's the potential impact of bringing the woolly mammoth or something like it back to life? First and foremost, let's talk about the environment. One of the biggest potential impacts of the Mammoth Project is on climate change, specifically in the Arctic. If these mammoth finch can be reintroduced into the wild, they could help restore the Arctic grasslands, an ecosystem that hasn't existed for thousands of years. And now, if this is successful, then it could have a significant impact on global climate change. Imagine a future where mammoth finch help turn the Arctic from a source of carbon emissions into a carbon sink, an area that absorbs more carbon than it releases. That's the kind of potential we're talking about here. The potential impact also goes beyond just the environment. There's also the scientific and technological advancements that could come from this project. The techniques being developed for the Mammoth Project, like gene editing and artificial wombs, it could revolutionize how we approach conservation and even human medicine. For example, the gene editing tools used to bring back mammoth traits could be applied to help endangered species adapt to the changing environments, or to remove genetic diseases from animal populations. This could open up new possibilities for preserving biodiversity in a world where many species are threatened by extinction. Then there's also the ethical and philosophical impact. If we succeed in bringing back the woolly mammoth, it could change how we think about extinction, conservation, and our relationship with nature. It raises big questions about our responsibility to the planet and whether we should use our technological power to reverse the mistakes of the past. Some people see this as a new era in conservation, where we're not just trying to save species from extinction, but also bringing them back. This could shift the focus of conservation efforts and lead to a whole new field of study centered around de-extinction and the restoration of ecosystems that have been lost for millennia. But with great power comes great responsibility. The potential impacts of the Mammoth Project are massive, but so are the risks. If it goes well, it could help save our planet and revolutionize science. But if it goes wrong, it could create new ecological problems, or set dangerous precedents for how we interact with nature. Imagine a future where mammoth finch roam the Arctic, helping to stabilize the climate and preserve biodiversity. But also imagine the potential consequences if these creatures disrupt existing ecosystems, or if we start to view de-extinction as a fix-all solution for all of our environmental mistakes. So the potential impact of the Mammoth Project is huge, with possibilities that stretch from saving our environment to changing the course of scientific history. It's also a reminder that we're stepping into uncharted territory, and the decisions we make today will shape the future of our planet. But what do you think? Are the potential impacts of the Mammoth Project worth the risks? Could this be the start of a new era in conservation, or are we playing with fire? Now, we've explored how this ambitious project isn't just about bringing back a prehistoric giant. It's about pioneering new technologies, addressing climate change, and even redefining our relationship with nature. But like any groundbreaking endeavour, it's not without its complexities and risks. The Mammoth Project is a bold step into uncharted territory, one that could shape the future in ways we can't fully predict yet. It's a story of innovation, responsibility, and the power of science. One that challenges us to think about the role we play in shaping our planet's future. Now, whether you're excited about the possibilities or concerned about the risk, one thing is clear: this project is sparking conversations that matter.